Okay, today we are going to talk about the role the flower plays in the plants. This is the conclusion to all of the different parts of a plant that we've been learning about. And with flowers, the first thing you need to know is their main function. Their main function is for reproduction. This is how plants make new flowers. Excuse me, let's try that one more time. This is how plants make new plants through reproduction. And they can do reproduction three ways. They can do it through the wind, they can do it by insects, or they can do it by birds. So if you've ever heard of someone having that uncomfortable conversation of how babies are made and they call it the birds and the bees talk, this is where that comes from. Learning about the birds and the bees is how plants reproduce. When we take a look at the cross section of a flower, the biggest thing that this slide is trying to show you is that there are two different leaves to the flower. The one you're most familiar with, the one that catches your eye, is known as the petal. It's the highly colored part of the flower, and sometimes it even has a perfume or smell to it. And then, of course, the leaves underneath the petals are known as sepals, and they will be visible to you when the flower is being produced, when it is still under construction and growing into a flower that's ready for reproduction, because that's called a bud, and you would see just the green leaves. But when that flower is ready for reproduction, the bud peels back, or the sepals fall off or roll back, and what opens up is the petals, letting the insects and the bees know, the birds know, that they're ready for reproduction. When we take a close look at both parts of the flower that make a new plant or a seed, this part here that you see on the right is the pistil. It's the female part of the plant. It contains three parts: a stigma, which is the opening, the style, which is the tube, and then the ovary, which is where the eggs are. And so, what obviously needs to happen here is the pistil has to become impregnated with the male part, and the male part is known as the stamen. If you ever have a quiz where you're trying to decide which part is male and which part is female, remember the word men is in the male part. The male part has two identifying different parts to it: the filament, which is the rod that holds it up, and the anther, which is at the top of it. Anther is also known as pollen, and like I was explaining before, the pollen needs to be released and then fall into the stigma, drop down the style, and into the ovary in order to fertilize eggs and produce seeds, which can turn into baby plants. Now, there are different classifications of flowers. There's the complete flower, the incomplete flower, the perfect flower, and the imperfect flower. And basically, a complete flower is a perfect flower, meaning it has all the male and female parts, meaning that that plant can reproduce a new seed, can make a new seed or a new plant straight from the same flower. However, there are some plants out there where they're incomplete flowers, and that means that that plant will have a male part or a male flower only and a female flower only. And then, of course, the pollen or anther would need to transfer from the male flower over to the female flower. And the female flower would be the only one that produces a seed. Now, there are different types of flowers out there. There are monoeosis flowers, and that's where the stamens and the pistils are found in separate flowers. Those are those incomplete flowers. Corn is an example of this, and that is a reason why we grow corn in rows, or in our square foot gardening in 4 in a square foot. And that's because as the wind blows across the male flowers, the stamens with their anther need to catch in the wind and then find the flowers that are the pistils in order to get corn. There are dioecious. Dioecious are plants where both there are male or stem flowers found on one plant and female or female petale flowers found on the another plant. So these are where they would be male only plants or female only plants. An example of that is holly. So one of the things that we benefit most from with flowers is the fact that some plants produce fruit that we can eat from these flowers. And they are obviously going to be ways in order for the seeds to transfer away from the plant and have their own place to grow. There are flowers that produce aggregate fruit. Aggregate fruit means that it develops from a single flower that has many different ovaries. Strawberries and tulips are an example of this. Then you also have fruit where it's a multiple. The fruit develops from a group of tightly clustered flowers. So it's not just one single flower, but it's a group of flowers that produces a fruit. Pineapple is an example of that. And then, of course, there is the simple fruit, and that is where there is a fruit that develops from one single ovary. Cherries and tomatoes are both examples of that. So, hopefully, this helps explain some of the flower's purpose and how we get fruit from these delicious flowers.